very important, and it can be more than one piece of legislation that would best aid our situation legislatively regarding education.
I'm as opposed to the people who are on the Tennessee legislature writing the bill as I am to people in Washington writing the bill. The bill needs to be written by educators, by teachers, by school board members, so that, because they understand the problems, they know what the issues are. It needs to be written by them, and once they came up with a good bill that solves the problem, then we need to support it and move it through and make it legislation.
Yeah, if you've got Tennesseans writing it, school superintendents. Proverbs says there's wisdom in the multitude of counselors, and I'm like Councilman Smothers said, I don't trust any legislators to write a bill like that. You need other folks to come to the table and more discussion. One thing, and it's really ironic that I'm going to compliment TEA at a Republican event, but I'm going to compliment TEA because they've reached out and they're better communicators than they used to be. But we're all in this together. It's not a Democrat thing, Republican thing, liberal thing, conservative thing. Bring folks to the table and look at the concerns, but develop it by Tennesseans, Tennessee standards, developed by Tennesseans, folks that know education. Legislators up there, there's so many bills that we run across, and we're trying to push things so fast to save money. And you're talking about a huge budget. In the scheme of things, getting out of session 2 weeks early or a month early, in my opinion, is not being responsible. We need to vet these issues and get folks together. And it kills me when we try to rush things. It's like not changing your oil in your car. Well, I'm going to save money because I'm not going to go to a 15-minute oil change. Just keep on driving. Well, you're going to ruin your motor. But vet these issues and bring folks to the table. There's a huge disconnect in government. McDonald's will never operate McDonald's the way government does. Tractor Supply wouldn't. 3M wouldn't. Home Depot wouldn't. If private sector operated like government did, they would be bankrupt, which we are bankrupt if you think about it. We're bankrupt as a nation.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
All right, I'll start off with a little context here. I'm not sure that everybody necessarily would fully understand the Hall income tax and what that's all about. Basically, the Hall income tax is a tax on unearned income or revenue income. It's a 6% tax. It disproportionately affects seniors and small businesses across the state. Some studies have indicated that it's actually pushing more revenue out of the state than what it takes in. The problem with that is that if you cut it immediately, it's several years before that revenue comes back in as more people see that we don't have that and move their businesses or their retirement into the state. So it's a progressive issue. We've been chipping away at it by creating exceptions based on certain income levels and things. Americans for Prosperity actually had an effort to get it fully repealed last year, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the first question, very simply, is do you in general support the repeal of the Hall income tax?
The answer to your question is yes, I support the repeal of the Hall income tax. It's commonly referred to as the death tax, and what it's really hurting more than anything is the people who are wanting to come to Tennessee, who are seniors, who don't have children, who don't rely on our system for the benefits that the communities have to provide in the state, and we're not allowing people to come to Tennessee to retire because they're afraid of what will happen with the Hall income tax. And so certainly I'm opposed to it, and would love to see it repealed.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine that owns a business here in Murfreesboro and Memphis and several other communities across the state. Pretty strong businessman, employs probably 1,000, 1,500 people, and he resides in Florida. Even though he has a home here, he's technically a Florida resident. I think once we could repeal it, I think we would attract some investment in Tennessee. I agree with the governor to try to phase it in. I think that's the right move. And going back on our state budget, we're $279 million in the hole, and we're able to balance it. But what's it going to be next year? Where we're at is at Tennessee. Look at how we border eight other states. Our sales tax is the highest. A lot of folks are going to Chattanooga when they're on that border state, or going to Rome, Georgia, Chickamauga to do their shopping. They go to Franklin, Kentucky when they're on that border, and they shop outside. But look at how we're shaped. But I think once we could repeal it hopefully will attract some investment. I think the governor's on the right track with slowly, incrementally taking bites at it.
Yeah, I do agree with the repeal of the hall income tax. I did get a survey. I'm not sure who sent that survey to me, but it was along those same lines. My question, though, had to be, feasibility, debt, and what was the option as far as phasing it in and phasing it out. And as long as there is the plan in place that we do not increase the debt in the state, I would love to have the hall income tax phased out.
And I'll kind of stack this question on top of the last one. Given the opportunity to write the legislation to do away with the hall income tax, how would you go about doing so? If it was
Writing
your
the
bill,
legislation?
if it was your bill, how would you do it?
It wouldn't be my bill. I would let someone on finance do it that's going to be more apt to get it done. I'm more, if you really want to get legislation passed, a lot of folks, I'm not saying they don't realize, you're more effective if you go straight to someone on finance. Go straight to Charles Sargent, the chairman, go to maybe the vice chairman, Harrison or someone like that to write it. They'll have more influence on that committee to get it done. You have certain representatives that are better at certain areas. I'm more transportation. I serve as vice chairman of transportation. So anything that's transportation related, I'd be more likely to carry it. Anything Homeland Security, the Department of Safety, I feel like I'd be successful carrying that. But on something like that, I would go to someone that's conservative on the finance committee. And we do have some folks that are conservative on the finance committee. Some people think they're not, but there's some that really are. Alexander would be a good one to write that piece of legislation.
With any legislation or with any problem that I look at, I go through a process, and that process is what is our premise, and the premise and what is our goal, and the goal would be to phase out the hall income tax without increasing debt to the state. And then I'll look at what our options are, and there may be 3 or 4 options that are out there as far as how we would phase this out. Some of the options are do nothing, some of the options are immediate. And then I'll look at what are the feasibility of each of those options. And for me, I would look at which option is the most feasible, and like you said, go through somebody through committee that will be able to write that legislation that I think would be the best option for our state.
And I agree. It needs to be written by someone in the finance department because, like Mike said, I think the state's budget last year for transportation was $436 million, I think it was, and they wound up cutting $100 million out of it at the end to come up with a balanced budget. But with a growing community like Murfreesboro and District 37, we're in a situation that we have to have roads. We have to have Highway 96 has to be widened. Thompson Lane has to be widened. These roads that we're sitting on jammed in traffic every day, we have to fund those projects. So we as taxpayers need to understand that yes, there are certain things that we need to look at to try and be fair about paying our taxes. We need to pay our way. It's not about me. I hate to refer back to the statement, but it's really, we've got to stop asking what our state can do for us, and we're going to have to say, what can we do for our state? And certainly we're going to have to participate and make sure that we're willing to do what it takes to make sure that the things that we ask for and the things that we request are funded. But certainly I do think that the tax needs to be, that particular tax needs to be repealed, because I think it is keeping people from coming to Tennessee who would be significant investors in property and development and growth, and if they don't come, then we will not be able to generate the revenue that we would get otherwise.
All right, and the last question, in the previous session this year, Americans for Prosperity supported legislation and worked with Charles Sargent to pass a repeal that would trigger after 3 years. It would reduce the hall income tax 1% in any year where there was a surplus to make up for that percentage, as a way to slowly phase it out over what could be 10 or 12 years. Representative Sparks, you signed our Americans for Prosperity pledge for that, and we thank you for that. So my final question is, would you sign that again? And for the other two gentlemen, would you sign that pledge to support that plan, that moderate, phased-in, fiscally responsible plan to eventually phase out the whole income tax?
Yes, I would want to phase out the hall income tax, yes.
Absolutely, yes, I would.
I would too, but I agree with Eddie saying we've got to fund roads, we've got to fund projects, you know, and Jefferson Pike and Smyrna need to be widened 10 years ago. You know, we need a new interchange, our congestion's terrible. The Federal Highway Trust Fund is insolvent next month. How many people know that here? That's alarming, folks. I talked to Senator Alexander's office, I said, has this ever happened? No. People don't realize, and Dana News Journal, no Dana News Journal here. Where's Scott Rowe? I seen Scott. Why isn't that a front page headline? Federal dollars bankrupt. That ought to be a front page headline, you know? But instead, y'all choose other headlines that are more dramatized. I mean, you know, it's just sad, you know? It's just sad. You know, these are alarming. This is the legacy we're leaving our kids. But I'm all about cutting taxes when you can, but we got to pay TDOT employees, we got to pay teachers, we got to build roads, and but I'll sign on to it.
All right, thank you very much.
I'm going to give Scott a hard time. He's a good
We're going to shift gears now. Council Smotherman, as I introduced myself at the beginning, I'm a longtime attorney practicing throughout Middle Tennessee. And throughout the 20 years that I practice, I've seen a decline in the judicial system. Article 6, Section 6 of the Tennessee Constitution gives the legislature the power, the authority, and the obligation to remove from office any judge of this state. And yet the legislators of the state have been influenced by the judicial branch into believing that they can police their own. And the legislature created first the Court of the Judiciary and now the Board of Judicial Conduct, all controlled by the judicial branch. It is only after they recommend removal that it would even come before the legislature. There has not been a removal in the state of Tennessee since 1994, in spite of the fact that they have over 300 complaints a year. Are you brave enough to take a stand and support legislation that would abolish the Board of Judicial Conduct and put those funds in a true oversight committee who